The moment my name disappeared from the applause, I knew my place in that room had been decided. 200 guests stood smiling under crystal lights, glasses raised, cameras flashing, and yet I felt completely alone on that stage. The celebration was not about graduation anymore. It was about comparison, favoritism, and a public verdict on my worth. My father stepped forward with a confident smile, his voice proud and loud enough to command the room. He announced a gift that made the crowd gasp. A brand new Rolls Royce for my sister. Applause exploded. Phones lifted higher. My sister smiled like she had expected nothing less. That was when I felt my chest tighten. Then my mother turned toward me. She did not whisper. She did not hesitate. Her voice cut through the celebration with cold clarity as she pointed in my direction and explained why someone like me did not deserve expensive gifts. She called me a failure in front of everyone who had ever mattered to our family. Laughter followed from places I did not expect. Silence followed from those who should have protected me. I stood there frozen, my hands shaking, my face burning. I wanted to speak. I wanted to defend myself. But years of being dismissed had trained me to stay quiet. Tears filled my eyes as I stepped down from the stage, each step heavier than the last. No one followed. No one stopped me. That night, I left the party early. I did not argue. I did not beg. I packed my pain carefully and carried it with me instead. While they celebrated success defined by money and appearances, something else was born inside me. A quiet determination they would never notice. They believed that night was the end of my story. They were wrong. Because the year that followed would change everything they thought they knew about failure, success, and the daughter they chose to overlook. The morning after the graduation party felt unreal, like the world had moved on without me while I was still standing in the same place. Messages flooded the family group chat, filled with photos of my sister posing beside her new car, captions praising her bright future. My name was nowhere. It was as if I had never been on that stage at all. I returned to my small apartment and sat on the floor, replaying every word my mother had said. Failure. Unworthy. Embarrassment. Those words had followed me my entire life, whispered at first, then spoken openly, and now announced in front of strangers. That night had not created the wound. It had simply exposed it. I made a decision that day. I would disappear from their narrative. I stopped asking for approval. I stopped explaining my choices. I took a job no one in my family considered impressive, but it paid enough to survive and left me time to build something of my own. Every night after work, I studied business models, investments, skills they never bothered to ask about. While they measured success by applause, I focused on progress no one could see. Months passed. Then more. I missed birthdays, holidays, and family dinners. No one noticed. Occasionally, my mother would call just to remind me how well my sister was doing. I listened without responding. Silence became my shield. What they did not know was that I was learning how money really moved. Not the kind spent on luxury cars, but the kind that built leverage and control. I made mistakes, learned from them, and kept going. Slowly, opportunities began to open. Small at first. Then bigger. One evening, I checked my account balance and realized something had shifted. For the first time, I was not surviving. I was building. The girl they labeled a failure was laying foundations they would never see coming, and as the year moved forward, I stopped thinking about revenge. I focused on becoming undeniable, because when the time came, I wanted the truth to speak louder than any insult ever could. By the time spring arrived, my life barely resembled the one they thought I was living. I had upgraded from that small apartment to a modest workspace I shared with 2 other driven women who believed in building something real. We worked long hours, not for applause, but for control over our future. Every decision we made was intentional. Every risk calculated. I started seeing patterns others missed. Markets that were ignored. People who were underestimated. I had lived that reality long enough to recognize its value. While my sister posted pictures of luxury dinners and weekend getaways, I reinvested every extra dollar back into growth. No celebrations. No announcements. Just progress. My parents still spoke of me as if I were lost. I heard it through distant relatives who repeated their words without thinking. They said I was struggling, that I could not handle pressure, that I would come crawling back one day. Each rumor strengthened my resolve. If they needed to believe that story, I would let them. One afternoon, an unexpected email arrived. A former professor reached out after seeing my name attached to a small but promising project. He offered guidance, connections, and something more valuable than money: credibility. With his support, doors began to open faster than I imagined. Weeks later, I attended a private networking event. I stood among people who spoke the language of influence, not ego. No one asked about my family name. They cared about results. That night, I secured a partnership that would change everything. As summer approached, my company crossed its first major milestone. The numbers were no longer small. They were undeniable. I remember staring at the screen late one night, hands trembling, realizing I had outgrown the girl who left that stage in tears. Still, I said nothing to my family, not because I feared their reaction, but because timing mattered. Power revealed too early loses its impact. And deep down, I knew the moment would come when they would need me. When that day arrived, the memory of the graduation party would finally be repaid in full. Autumn arrived with quiet victories stacking one after another. My company expanded beyond what I had originally planned. New clients came through referrals, not advertisements. People trusted results more than promises, and results were something I delivered relentlessly. Every long night, every sacrifice I had made since leaving that stage began to shape a future no one in my family could imagine. Ironically, that was when cracks started forming in their perfect picture. I heard about it through distant relatives first. My sister's glamorous lifestyle was costing more than it produced. The expensive car, the parties, the appearances meant to impress the right people were draining resources fast. My parents had invested heavily in her image, convinced it would guarantee long-term success. But image without substance is fragile. Meanwhile, I stayed invisible. I changed my number. I avoided family gatherings completely. Not out of anger, but focus. I no longer needed closure from people who never offered protection. My validation came from balance sheets, contracts signed, and teams growing stronger under my leadership. One evening, my father called unexpectedly. His tone was unfamiliar. Polite. Careful. He asked how I was doing, as if he were speaking to a stranger. I answered briefly and kept my guard up. He mentioned business struggles in passing, testing the ground. I listened without reacting. After the call ended, I sat in silence, realizing something important. The power dynamic had begun to shift. They no longer spoke from certainty. They spoke from concern. Weeks later, an invitation arrived. A family gathering. Casual, they claimed. I knew better. Desperation always wears politeness first. I declined without explanation. Behind the scenes, my company closed a deal that placed us on a national platform. Press interest followed. Articles were drafted. My name was moving in circles my family had always wanted access to. They still did not connect the dots, but they would. Because the same daughter they dismissed publicly was now standing where their pride could no longer reach her, and soon, they would be forced to face the cost of their words. Winter arrived with consequences no one in my family was prepared for. The investments my parents had made began to collapse one by one. Deals they bragged about at dinner parties quietly failed. Connections they trusted stopped answering calls. The confidence they once carried started to sound forced, then fragile. Through mutual contacts, I learned my sister's career had stalled. The bright future they announced so proudly had not materialized. Opportunities dried up when results failed to follow the image. The luxury car that once symbolized success became a reminder of poor judgment. At the same time, my world was accelerating. Our company secured a multi-million-dollar contract that positioned us as a serious competitor in the market. My team expanded. New offices opened. People who once overlooked me now sought my attention. The irony was sharp but controlled. I did not chase recognition. I chose precision. One evening, my mother called. Her voice was softer than I remembered. She asked how I was managing. The question felt heavy with regret, though she never admitted it. She spoke about family, about unity, about how things had been misunderstood. I listened quietly, offering nothing. She then mentioned they were facing difficulties. Real ones. The kind money could not hide. For the first time, she asked for advice. Not as a mother correcting a child, but as someone uncertain. I told her I was busy and ended the call. That night, I revisited the memory of the graduation party. The lights. The applause. The finger pointed at me. The word failure echoing in my mind. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled me. It fueled me. The truth was simple. They had measured my worth by gifts and appearances. I had measured mine by resilience and strategy. As the year drew closer to its end, the stage was set, they were running out of options, and I was holding all of them. The closer the year came to its end, the more urgent their calls became. Messages that once carried authority now arrived wrapped in hesitation. My father left voicemails filled with pauses he never used to have. My mother sent long texts about family values and forgiveness, words she had never offered when I needed them most. I did not respond. Instead, I focused on preparing for something much bigger. My company was finalizing a public partnership that would place us directly in the spotlight. Press coverage was scheduled. Investors were lining up. The same circles my parents once tried desperately to impress were now discussing my work with admiration. That was the first hook. The second came when I received an invitation to speak at a regional business summit. The event would be televised. Industry leaders would attend. And among the guest list, I recognized familiar names. Friends of my parents. People who had attended that graduation party. I accepted. Days before the summit, my father finally reached me. His voice broke through the speaker with a humility I had never heard before. He admitted they were struggling. The investments were failing. They needed guidance, connections, and financial support. He said family should help family. I listened until he finished. Then I told him I would be attending an event soon. I did not explain which one. I did not offer help. I simply ended the call. The night before the summit, I stood in front of a mirror, adjusting my jacket. I saw the same girl who once left a stage in tears, but she no longer bowed her head. She had built something from nothing, without applause, without protection. The summit hall was packed. Cameras rolled. When my name was announced, applause filled the room. I stepped onto the stage with calm confidence, fully aware that somewhere in that audience, my parents would be watching. This time, the spotlight was mine, and they could not look away. Because the truth they had avoided for a year was about to be revealed in front of everyone who once believed their version of my story, the applause did not fade quickly. It carried weight, the kind that comes from earned respect rather than obligation. As I began speaking, the room leaned in. I talked about resilience, about building value where no one expects it, about failure being a label often assigned by people afraid of patience. Every sentence felt deliberate, sharpened by memory. From the corner of my vision, I noticed familiar faces stiffen. Friends of my parents exchanged glances. Some nodded slowly, recognition dawning. They were connecting the dots in real time. I shared my journey without bitterness. No accusations. No names. I spoke about leaving environments that measured worth by comparison and learning to define success on my own terms. The audience responded with quiet intensity. They understood. When I finished, the applause returned, stronger than before. Reporters gathered immediately. Cameras flashed. Questions followed about leadership, strategy, and future plans. I answered with clarity and confidence, aware that every word was being watched far beyond that room. After the event, messages flooded in. Congratulations. Partnership offers. Requests for meetings. And among them, a single message from my mother. She said she was proud of me. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The words came too late to heal what had been broken, but they confirmed something important. They finally saw me. Later that evening, I learned my parents had tried to reach out to some of the same investors who now worked with me. They were turned away politely. Reputation mattered. And theirs was unraveling. The balance had shifted completely. They had lifted one daughter by pushing the other down. Now, the weight of that decision had come back to them, and the final reckoning was closer than they realized. The call came a week later, just as I finished signing the final papers for a deal that secured my company's future for years to come. My father's name flashed on the screen. This time, I answered. His voice sounded tired. Not angry. Not proud. Just worn down by consequences. He did not talk about money at first. He spoke about mistakes, about how they misjudged me, about how the world had not rewarded the choices they were so confident about a year ago. Then he asked for help. I let the silence sit long enough to say everything words could not. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm. I told him I wished them stability, but I would not rescue them from lessons they needed to learn. I reminded him, gently, of the stage, the crowd, and the moment they decided who deserved respect. He understood. I could hear it in his breath. After the call ended, I did not feel triumph. I felt release. Revenge was never about watching them fall. It was about standing tall without them. In the months that followed, my company continued to grow. I invested in young talent, especially those overlooked by others. I became the mentor I never had. The cycle stopped with me. As for my family, they adjusted to a quieter life. No luxury cars. No public praise. Just reality. The same reality they once believed I could not survive. Sometimes I think back to that graduation party. The lights. The applause. The finger pointed in my direction. And I realize something now that I could not understand then. That night did not break me. It freed me. They gave my sister a Rolls Royce in front of the world. A year later, life gave me something far more powerful. My worth, proven without their permission.